Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm rolling out a new series called Black Women Escape the Cake. Have you ever felt like you had to be everything to everyone? Like there was no room for you to just be you? I am going to talk today about the burden of the superwoman and why we wear the cape. And some of these videos are going to talk about why we need to put it down. So you see me looking down because I just want to give you a quick definition of what I am referring to when I say superwoman. There has been a sort of a guideline that represents the strong woman persona, and it includes 5 elements. One is feeling an obligation to present an image of strength. And I think that many of us as Black women, we have felt that. We've been told since we've been little that we needed to be strong. The other one is a feeling of an obligation to suppress emotions. Many of us were taught we got to have that stiff upper lip no matter how we're feeling, no matter what's happening inside. We just needed to present a sort of a stoic physical appearance to where we're not encouraged really to show emotions and things like that. And I'm not saying all of us, I'm just saying a number of us. The next element is feeling an obligation to suppress emotions. And I know that this is touchy because in our Black community, many of us, we are told number one, don't tell our business. Number two, a lot of us were not encouraged to seek external support as it relates to emotional care from a therapist or what have you. Many of us been taught to just keep it in the house and keep it under wraps and that we don't share those other things. Another element is resistance to being vulnerable. So that gives that hardness that some people describe when they say they see and deal with Black women. They feel that there is a shell, and that shell is there because we were encouraged, many of us, from little girls to have a shell, to not show that we are vulnerable. That goes back to that strength of being strong and being a person who cannot be hurt. So some people take that to mean, oh, they don't get hurt. Yeah, we get hurt. We were just taught, you just don't show it. And you hear people say this all the time, never let people see you cry. A lot of us have been taught to internalize these behaviors, and we have, and it's a part of that super woman persona that Black women have been branded as having. Another element is a drive to succeed despite limited resources. And so many of us have been told, hey, we have to work 2, 3, 4 times as hard to get half as far. And what that means is, hey, there's so many barriers to our progression. But despite those barriers, despite how perhaps unrealistic it is for us to move forward, we are to continue moving forward. We are continue to work hard, regardless that we will make it to this finish line and we are going to succeed. And that is something that many of us carry to our jobs. We carry in a lot of areas, our personal lives, every area. And it's a lot. It is a lot. It is what gives us that hustle culture that many of us adopted. I have let it go. I'll do another video on that. But that hustle culture, just keep pushing, keep hitting against that wall, keep hitting that wall, keep hitting that wall, and eventually the wall will crack. But we'll talk about the cost of that a little bit later in the video. And the fifth thing is feeling an obligation to help others. So when we have that feeling that we are to be all to everyone, even to our own detriment, many of us have been taught that's just who we are. We have to take that particular role of the superwoman, of the protector of the culture, of the protector of the family, of the protector of many things. And not only the protector, we have been taught, hey, we are supposed to both nurture and protect. And when you think about things, that's not a balance. There's a reason why we have partnerships and we get into relationships. Why? Because those things are supposed to help support the things that we need to do. Some of us are to nurture and some of us are to protect. But when you're doing both, you can imagine how that is a recipe, can be a recipe for an invisible disaster. And the reason why I say invisible disaster is because many of us Black women, as we are putting on our capes that may be dazzled and got pearls and diamonds on them, as we are wearing these capes and operating in our superwoman role, many of us are suffering because we are doing these things that we are expected to do, that we were taught to do from, like I said, as a child, to our own detriment. Many of us are stressed. Many of us are suffering different chronic diseases. And stress, as many of you know, can cause many forms of inflammation in the body. And those forms of inflammation could include arthritis. It can include things that cause diabetes. They're finding that diabetes is a result of forms of inflammation in the body and just different chronic illnesses. And earlier, when I was giving you the five elements of the superwoman persona, I was reading from an article, and I will link that article in the description notes below. I propose that we take off the cape. The cape is not protecting us, it's harming us in many areas. I mentioned stress. We know that stress can cause our cortisol levels, which is the stress hormone, to be out of whack. And so, what does that do? That can contribute to weight gain, weight loss, eating disorders, and what have you. And many of us, despite how good we look, are stressed. Okay. So we need to put down that cape. And I encourage you to do that. I have put mine down. Historically, Black women have been encouraged to embrace the role of a superwoman. And some of us may even say it goes back to slavery. I personally feel it goes back to slavery because Black women were considered to be superhuman in many ways. How? From our waist up, we were expected to work alongside our men folk in the fields, picking cotton or whatever was the crop of that particular plantation. That's what we were expected to do. And many of us were expected to pick up the same amount that our husbands were having to pick. Okay, so that is something that a lot of people don't think about. Black women from the waist down were expected to replenish the workforce by having babies. And these babies were not hers, even though they came from her body. A lot of times they were sold off. And so that's what I mean by superwoman and not being human. The top part of us, a commodity for bringing in the cash crops, whatever it was. The bottom part of us was a commodity for replenishing the labor force of the plantation that our ancestors were held captive on, or neighboring plantations, or plantations other places. So that's, I think, the root of the superwoman stereotype that has just stuck with Black women. I just want to talk briefly about the emotional and the mental and the physical toll of trying to be everything to everyone, the toll that it takes on us. It is a huge toll because we are constantly giving and giving and giving, and not always in a situation of replenishing what's inside of us. We give to everyone in terms of support, in terms of encouragement, in terms of partnership, in terms of allyship. We do all the things. We do them in the homes, we do them in our families, we do them in the communities, we do them in our country. And the thing about all of these roles we play, it's almost like it's an expectation. These expectations are passed down from generation to generation to the point where many of us pass these expectations down to our children, our daughters. And I'm not saying we're not supposed to do anything. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is we need to, as a community, during this time that we are doing our rest, I am suggesting that we pull back a little bit and we spend time reprioritizing the things that are important, the things that are going to give us longevity. Part of longevity is to care for ourselves. We want to have longevity and we want to be able to pass a positive legacy to our children. Sometimes we need to take some time as Black women to pull back and to focus on our own mental, emotional, and physical well being, whether that's just taking some time to rest, whether that's going to a therapist, whether that's going to social gatherings that give us joy, whether that's taking up a hobby, whether that's just doing nothing, spending time with ourselves. It will help us to avoid feeling burnt out. It'll help us to not be disconnected from ourselves. One of the things I want to highlight is that when we are doing everything for everyone, we don't have any space for self discovery of ourselves or purpose. And so I encourage us to reframe the superwoman narrative and understand that particular persona, that stereotype, it's not healthy, it's not sustainable, and how taking off that superwoman cape does not mean we are not strong. It does not mean we're less, does not mean we're not resilient. We are still all those things, but it means that we can be stronger internally because we're connecting with the essence of who we are. We're connecting with God, who I feel I get my strength from spending that time with Him in the mornings, listening to Him, talking to God, understanding what it is we were created to be. And we were not created to be super women. I'm going to just tell you that. We were not created to solve everybody's problems. We were not created to cook everybody's meals. We were not created to march at everybody's march. And we were created as human, which means that it's okay to be vulnerable and it's okay to unburden ourselves from the unrealistic expectations of others. It's okay to do that. In fact, I'm going to encourage you during our Black woman rest era. I encourage you to take off our capes, to get us some rest, and to work on us. I challenge you to spend some time to reflect on the times that you have worn the Superwoman cape in your life and to share in comments what part of the cape do you need to take off in order for you to discover your true self. And I encourage you to commit to one small act of self care this week, whatever it is. Do it for you. Don't explain it to nobody. Do it for you. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, share this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. Until the next video, we'll talk.